Revolt Nation, Hannah Rad here alongside a group of insightfully talented individuals to talk about something that, I'm not gonna lie, is a little hard to talk about. We are discussing misogynistic terms and tones and rape culture in media, music, and beyond. And I know y'all as Sevonna, Ivie, Natelege, and Christina, but I would love if you could just give me a rundown of whom you are and what you do. So we'll start with you.
Well, my name is Christina Coleman. I am the Senior News and Culture Editor at Essence.com currently, a digital content creator, Black feminist, and my work is really rooted in advocating for women, specifically women of color, because I often believe that if we don't speak up for ourselves, who will?
Gotcha. Thank you.
My name is Natelege Whaley. I'm currently culture reporter at Mic.com, and my work covers a span of different topics from music to social justice to women's issues, and I really want to center the narratives of women of color when I write and report, and so that's what I'm focused on right now. Yeah.
My name is Ivie Ani. I'm a culture journalist, and I cover everything under the umbrella of culture, which is social and political analysis, social and cultural analysis, music, art, politics, and anything that has to do with people and engaging and truth-telling and storytelling.
My name is Sevonna Brown. I'm coming from Black Women's Blueprint. I'm the Gender Justice and Director of Communications, and our work centers around healing justice for women who are survivors of rape and sexual assault, and everything we do comes from a Black feminist lens.
Great. Well, I'm so glad that you all had time to come here and sit and talk today. I noticed one word, well, two words actually, that all four of you mentioned, and that was social and that was culture. And the culture that we're attempting to define and give some insight and meaning to from our lens is that of rape culture and how we interact with that and how we see that being portrayed either in media, music, or in the lines of work that we do. I guess for me, it's something that I often hear when it comes to music and lyrics, and that's a really easy thing to pin it upon. But coming from something that's even bigger and broader than that, when you talk about misogynistic tones, that's the empowering of men as seeing women as someone who's not equal and seeing someone who they have a hatred towards. Where do you see that happening in your lines of work, and how are you addressing that in the things that you're doing and that you're writing about and you're trying to convey in your form of writing and media?
Whew.
That's a good question.
It is a good question. So let's talk about media. Let's talk about the workplace. Because I think that we all work in different. It's the same media. We all have kind of a similar focus, which is Black feminism, and acknowledging the intersections of that work. But it's really workplace, right? And we also see a lot of the Me Too movement. What do I want to say? The women coming forward, from a workplace standpoint, right? It's like where I work is where I'm getting abused.
Right.
And so when you talk about misogyny, you're talking about the prejudice against women or discrimination against women, and it's really prevalent in the workspace. And so it's no surprise that women are coming forward to say, not only am I not getting paid enough, not only am I not getting respected at the conference table, not only does my boss hate me because he's not acknowledging my opinion or my ideas, but I'm also getting sexually harassed and assaulted. And so really I think this recent reckoning, which is nothing new. I mean, you work in this space and you know that it's been happening for a really long time, is important specifically because women go to work every single day, right? Music and entertainment is one thing, and it's kind of this abstract thing that we're not all into, but we all work, right? And I'm really excited to see what happens. I do have some criticisms about how this is moving forward and how we're going to really hold people accountable. But in order to dismantle rape culture, we first have to dismantle misogyny and let everyone know we're equal and we're not going to be silent.
Right. I like that you brought up that point, because while they are two very different things, they do kind of come to a head in a crossroads, especially in the workplace. Because a lot of times, like you mentioned it, you say you come in and you come to work, and he as your boss, and I think that's something that we can potentially all relate with, where we've probably at some point in our careers have spoken to a higher authority who's a male figure. Or is that similar for all of you?
Yes. Absolutely. I think what that brings up too is the power dynamic that rape culture perpetuates. And something that I like to think of, or I hate to think of, but we must, right, is how rape culture is really this like trifecta of sexism, patriarchy, and misogyny. They're really the arms and legs of rape culture. And so when we're fighting rape culture, like you said, we're fighting misogyny, but we're also fighting sexism and patriarchy, which are all rooted in these power dynamics. And so that's where it becomes pervasive, not just in the workplace, but also walking down the street, right? So we all are familiar with catcalling. That's the beginning, right, of rape culture, is the way that we engage with one another, the way that we engage with each other as colleagues, with each other as citizens of this world, right? So how are we working towards breaking down just social engagement so that we can defeat this three-headed monster that is rape culture?
Can I add about that? And like, you know, it's really defining that what is the culture we want to see in place of rape culture. And, you know, each of us have a right to sexual agency, and we have the right to have sex with who we want, when we want, how we want. But when that is not honored, when your no is not honored, when this consent is not there, then this is when rape culture is becoming, this is when you're starting to see those behaviors. And that's why when you talk about rape culture, you're not just talking about rape, you're talking about a multitude of behaviors where, you know, someone's agency has been completely violated. And, you know, it can happen to men and women, but because of power dynamics, because of the way privilege works in society, the same way racism works, when you look at that totem pole, it's when you look at sexism and you look at rape culture in particular, the people who are mostly protected are usually the people who are getting the most money, who are protected in other ways, and the people who aren't are usually the ones who are making less money, who have less access. So it's marginalization, just another form of it, but we have to remember that it's not, rape culture isn't sex, it's about abuse of power.
And I think that brings up a good point, because oftentimes you hear rape culture and then you hear the word normalization within that capacity, because it's something that has gone on for so long. It's almost like, not that we're used to it, but we kind of are. It's like you expect someone to say something. You almost go into a workplace or a meeting or something, and you're like, someone's gonna say something, or walking down the street, like you can see a group of people and you're like, this is gonna happen, and then what do you do with it? Well, if you don't step out and say something against it, you just turn up your headphones louder. You're helping normalize that as well too, because you're not doing anything about it. And I think the lines of work that you're all doing speak to that, because if you're speaking out on behalf of women, speaking out on social justice and cultural issues, then that's taking one step forward in the breaking down of that normalization. For you, for the space that you're in, how does that compare? Because with OkayPlayer, you're focusing on music, and you're focusing on the things that, you know, in the artists that might give a little more leeway when it comes to certain terminology. Like, how do you find the balance between supporting someone and not normalizing this scenario?
That's a really good question, and I just want to point out that I'm a culture journalist, right? So music falls under that umbrella of culture because it falls under art, you know? So it's covering music is tricky from that angle, because there are people who do not take that social and cultural analysis lens, but I really feel that it's imperative to do so if you want to cover music in a holistic way. Because when we're all using this word culture, but I don't think the masses don't have a working knowledge of how culture functions over time. And you're using this word normalization, and that's exactly what culture is. Over periods of time, we begin to normalize behavior and engagement and practices. And right now, like you said before, we're having this reckoning. It's like a Pandora's box of all these societal ills that have always been prevalent, but now we're just kind of reckoning with what this means right now in this culture. And the culture of right now is being vocal, hence the Me Too movement, right? And hence the Time's Up movement in terms of equal pay for women. But this isn't justice that's happening right now. It's just, you know, it's just voices being heard. Because when we talk about equality, what does that mean? Equality is not justice.
When I said I had criticisms about this reckoning, I am so proud of the women that have come forward to tell their truths. But where that criticism lies is exactly what you said. Where is the accountability, and what are the next steps? Like, what happens after we say enough is enough? And I feel like the people, the perpetrators, they're not being held accountable enough. And what happens is you deal with some public embarrassment because, you know, someone comes forward and then nothing happens. You know why? Because power.
Yeah.
And this is the culture.
Yeah.
Men are allowed to give lame apologies
Right.
and not have any type of tangible repercussions.
Sure.
All they do is take a hiatus and give a public statement that they're taking a break.
Well, you look at a few of those, and I don't mean this to like name blast anyone in particular, but in recent weeks we've seen Harvey Weinstein, Aziz Ansari, Russell Simmons give these apologies, these one-page documents, and say, but I have the support of my family and friends and loved ones, and then you don't hear from them for months, and then there becomes a period of time, and this was even prevalent last year during the Oscars with Casey Affleck, who won the Oscar, and it's very divisive because it's like, well, we kind of forgive him because he's a great actor, and there he is on this public setting with millions of eyes watching, and something in the back of your mind is just like, whoa, what happened like 3 weeks ago when all of these accusations came out? How do you separate one from the other as someone who's in the workplace doing an amazing job, but behind the scenes at the workplace is pervading these very aggressive physical or verbal accusations?
And it's about how do they get to the point that they're able to maneuver through these industries for so long, having made so many transgressions and having had people be silent. And that just corresponds to the way that these structures intertwine, the way the capitalist structure intertwines with suppressing women's rights, and how women have to sort of navigate through capitalism and make these sacrifices, these personal sacrifices in order to exist in a workforce, right? Having to stay silent to keep a job.
Because there's women who have like literally died, you know, committed suicide or gave up on their dream because of that perpetrator. And what does that do to, you know, who has the right to take that from another human being, you know, and that's what rape culture does. Like,
and something else I wanted to add about the normalization piece, right, is I have a 3-month-old son, so right now I'm really thinking about like, what kinds of things am I doing to work through his black masculinity, through patriarchy with him? And I think part of the normalization, right, is like being like, boys will be boys, and little man, and this and that, right?
That's like the worst
boys will be boys. It grinds my gears because that is that's where rape culture starts to manifest. It's like this allowance, this pass, this like sweep it under the rug, no accountability, like you stated, that allows for it to keep going on. And then there's also the culture of silence, which is a part of patriarchy, right? It allows for everyone to be silent, even those standing by, right? So there's no bystander intervention, there's no community accountability, right? So community is watching while rape and sexual assault is happening, while sexual harassment is happening in the workplace. So it's not just the perpetrator, right? But also rape culture is people participating in it, being complicit in it. So that's something I wanted to note about the normalization of rape culture.
It's really the reason why R. Kelly is allowed to operate the way that he does.
Like, but he makes good music.
Right, and so we have to now figure out if we are going to separate the artist from these actions. But I did want to talk about justice and just take it a step further, since we all live and work in these intersections. And I think that if your justice is that your perpetrator, the person that attacked you or assaulted you, is embarrassed on a public stage and has to make a statement, then that's that. But for black women, that's not even happening. There's not even an acknowledgement. And that's, when we talk about justice, that's really hard for me to like grapple with, because you're not even acknowledging that you assaulted or offended or abused this black woman. That's why Harvey Weinstein can only reply to Lupita and people just blink and forget about it, right? It's why women that come forward, even in this latest iteration of a movement to dismantle rape culture, Me Too, black men can come forward and say, hey, this happened to me, and people just turn their heads.
It's unfortunate because it's almost like you can dissect it into like levels of apologies and actions, and where it's like, it's not just women as a whole, it's like, well, you have, Hispanic women, or you have black women, or you have white women come forward, or someone of a woman of higher stature. If Uma Thurman comes out and talks about Harvey Weinstein, she's getting the apology. If I were to come forward just hypothetically and say something about Harvey Weinstein, I might not get the same kind of respect or apology when it comes to that. And I think it's entirely unfortunate, but I want to ask you specifically, because you deal with women on a daily basis from all walks of life who come forward and share their experiences with you. But why right now? And I would say even within the last 12 months, Me Too was not a thing. This didn't exist until a few months ago. What was the shift, and what was the moment that maybe you saw from your angle where it was like, why now are women coming forward when it has been something that's been perpetuated through decades throughout history?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you're making a point to say that this rape culture is not new. It's not a new monster. It's not a new beast. We've been fighting it for years and years. And 2 years ago, Black Women's Blueprint actually did a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to talk about this question of justice. Like, what is justice to Black women, and what does it look like in a nation that our backs were built on, right? So, it's really important to think about the presidential election as a part. 45 was elected right after the Black Women's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and Black women were saying there's a rapist in the White House right now, right? And that's very charged, like language and charged position. But it's real. It's real talk, right? When there's allegations and accusations against the President of the United States. So what does it look like to live in a country where 53% of white women voted for this person who got into our office, right? And so I think that it's really a moment where women are looking amongst themselves for power, collective mobilization. And it's like, okay, we're marching now, we're rallying, we're running for office, right? So there's this political movement that's happening, but then there's also the culture shift that's happening, right? We can't have these conversations in political offices if we're not having them on the ground in our communities.
We are a music network here, and I want to talk about lyrics and music and artists.
Let's do that.
Because, some of my favorite artists, Justin Bieber, Rick Ross, Pharrell, and Robin Thicke, all in the past couple of years have had songs on the radio that went super high up in the charts, but all have tones of things that are just, if you and I sat here and talked about it, we would be looked at with disgust. Justin Bieber, what do you mean? What do you mean when you nod your head yes, but the answer is no? What do you mean? Well, come on, what are you talking about?
I think it would be easier to name men who don't have those types of, but how can you even, I can't even think of this out of my head.
But how do we also, how do we dissect it and differentiate between being a fan of someone's music and then how do we support them or not when they deviate and say something that's so outlandish and offensive?
I think,
this is one of the hardest things when I talk to Black women about this, because we actually did a protest at an R. Kelly concert a couple weeks ago. He was here in New York. He had 2 shows.
And he still gets booked. That's the thing.
But when we talked to Black women in line, it was really interesting because some of the sisters were like, I've experienced sexual assault, but I love this jam. I'm about to go there, But it's just like, how do we have this conversation and talk about we're talking about child sexual abuse, right? I'm not talking about R. Kelly sexually abusing you. I'm talking about, a minor, right? Young children, young women, right? So I think the decisions that we make, like where we put our money, where we put our headphones, where we put all of those things, right? That informs rape culture, right? If I'm listening to it and I do social justice work, then I'm complicit, right? I'm perpetuating it. I'm telling someone else that it's okay, that this artist is fine. You can put it aside for this moment while you listen to this 3-minute, 45-second song. But that's not true. We can't put that away if we actually value women and girls. So that's what it looks like to actually start practicing debunking misogyny.
And the onus is always placed on women consumers for some reason, right? For some reason, as if we are the ones who created these systems, as if we are not the ones who have to navigate these systems in order to survive, in order to enjoy life, right? But I want to, as a culture journalist, I want to also talk about the way in which these artists are covered in dangerously lazy, sloppy, unequipped ways. And you look at artists like Tekashi 6ix9ine or XXX Tentacion or R. Kelly, and these men and their transgressions are dismissed. You know what I mean? There's so many artists you can name that are so far removed from us as 20-something-year-olds. You know what I mean? We don't know their history until we look it up on Wikipedia and see so-and-so beat their wife, so-and-so had a sexual assault case, And that just goes to show that this isn't a new phenomenon. So many OGs in the game have done the same and worse. We just don't know about it, right? So there's a way in which journalists can cover these artists without being complicit by being, I would hate to talk about objectivity and subjectivity at this point, but there is a way to cover these artists and talk about the cultural trends without having an interview being an endorsement. You know what I mean? There's a way to interview a problematic artist without endorsing them, you know?
I like that. Thank you all so much. What I love about what I do is this right here. Having this, and I don't want to put too much on blast, but I see it's all men behind the cameras right here.
Yeah.
So we're the ones in front of the camera. We're having a conversation. We thank all y'all men for all y'all support. I thank you ladies as well too for coming by and having the conversation. Like I said, these are conversations that are not done just when the camera stops rolling. This is something that will continue to move forward in all of the lines of work that you do, and you have to be commended for it in so many ways. Education, knowledge, support, loving yourself, loving everyone else, and paying homage to those that have come before us as well too. I think you guys are doing amazing work, and I thank you all so much. More coming soon on Revolt TV.